The knock came at 12:47 a.m. Not loud, not urgent, just 3 slow taps, spaced too evenly to be human. I froze on the couch, the Christmas lights blinking behind the TV, reflecting red and green shadows across the walls like dying signals. Outside, the street was empty. Snow lay untouched. No footsteps. No wind. No cars. The knock came again. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. No one knocks that late on Christmas night. No one who means well. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from an unknown number. Don't open it. Before I could react, the door handle twitched. Just slightly. As if something on the other side was testing whether I'd locked it. I whispered, barely audible. Who's there? Silence. Then a voice pressed close to the wood. Calm. Familiar. Son, it's cold. My blood turned to ice. That was my father's voice. My father had been dead for 3 years. The door creaked. Not opening, just breathing. And behind it something knocked again. I stayed on the couch until dawn, afraid that if I moved, the house would notice. The Christmas lights blinked until one by one they burned out, leaving only the pale gray of morning seeping through the curtains. The knock never returned, but that somehow made it worse. Silence wasn't peace anymore. It felt like something holding its breath. When the sun finally rose, it revealed what the dark had hidden. Footprints circled the house. They weren't deep, even though the snow was fresh. No heel marks. No toes. Just smooth, elongated impressions, like someone had pressed the idea of feet into the ground instead of the real thing. They stopped at the front door. Not facing away. Facing in. I didn't remember unlocking the door, but it was unlocked now. That realization sat heavy in my stomach as I stepped outside, the cold biting through my coat. The air smelled wrong, stale, like an abandoned room that hadn't been opened in years. The woods around the house stood still, branches frozen mid-reach, as if the night hadn't quite let go of them yet. This house was supposed to be empty. That's why I came back. 3 years since my father's death. 2 since my mother moved away and refused to return. She said the house made her forget things. Not memories, pieces, names, time, whole conversations. She never explained more than that. I used to think grief did strange things to people. Now I wasn't so sure. Inside, the house felt tighter. The hallway seemed narrower than I remembered. The ceiling lower. My footsteps sounded delayed, like the house needed a moment to decide whether to echo them back. I walked room to room, checking doors, windows, corners, rituals meant to restore logic. Everything was locked from the inside. No broken glass. No signs of entry. And yet I wasn't alone during the night. The living room clock had stopped at 12:47. I didn't remember it ever breaking. I reached to reset it, and stopped. The dust around it was disturbed, as if fingers had recently rested there. Not mine. I moved slowly now, careful not to make noise, not because I feared something would hear me, but because I feared the house already had. The kitchen smelled faintly of pine and something sour beneath it. The fridge door stood open a few inches. Inside, the light flickered weakly over food I didn't remember buying. A half-eaten apple sat on the counter. Its flesh had browned, but the bite mark was too wide. I backed away, my pulse hammering in my ears. Get a grip, I whispered to myself. The sound of my own voice startled me. It sounded smaller here, swallowed too quickly by the walls. I checked my phone. No signal. The message from earlier. The warning was gone. No trace it had ever existed. That scared me more than the knock. Because messages don't erase themselves. At noon, I forced myself to leave the house and walk to the neighbors. The Garcias lived 2 houses down, the last family who hadn't moved away yet. Their lights were on. Curtains open. Signs of life. Mrs. Garcia opened the door just enough to see my face. Her smile faded instantly. You came back, she said. Not hello. Not Merry Christmas. Just that. I nodded. Last night someone knocked on my door. She inhaled sharply like I'd struck her. Her husband appeared behind her, already pale. "What time?" he asked. 12:47. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then Mrs. Garcia whispered, "It always chooses that time." I felt cold again, even standing in their warm hallway. They didn't invite me in. Instead, Mr. Garcia leaned close and said very quietly, "Did it sound like someone you loved?" I couldn't answer. That was enough. They closed the door without another word. By the time I walked back, the sky had clouded over, heavy with the promise of snow. The house waited for me, dark and patient. As I stepped inside, something shifted upstairs. A single footstep. Slow. Testing. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, staring up into the dim second floor. The banister creaked softly, though nothing touched it. Then a voice drifted down. Not loud, not threatening, almost tired. "You left the door unlocked." I gripped the wall to stay upright. That voice wasn't my father's. It was mine. I backed away as the upstairs hallway light flicked on by itself. And from the top of the stairs, something that knew my voice perfectly took one step closer to coming down. I did not go upstairs. Not at first. I stayed pressed against the wall at the bottom of the stairs, staring into the light that had no right to be on. The bulb hummed faintly, the sound stretching too long, vibrating through the banister and into my bones. "You left the door unlocked." My voice. Perfect. Every pause. Every breath. I waited for it to say more. To mock me. To laugh. It didn't. Silence returned. Thick, listening silence. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. Time had started slipping, folding in on itself the way it does in nightmares. Eventually, the light upstairs switched off again. Just like that. No footsteps. No retreat. As if whatever stood there had decided it didn't need to come down yet. I locked myself in the living room for the rest of the day. Dragged furniture against the doors. Sat with my back to the couch, eyes fixed on the hallway. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. Every small sound made my heart stutter. The house cooling, wood shifting, pipes breathing. By evening, snow had begun to fall again, heavy and quiet. The world outside vanished behind white, and with it, any sense that help still existed. That was when the house began to change. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Subtly. The kind of changes you doubt even as you're noticing them. The hallway felt longer than it had that morning. The door to the spare bedroom stood open, though I was sure I had closed it. Family photos along the wall had shifted, not fallen, not broken, just slightly angled, like someone had adjusted them to see better. I stood and walked closer. My father's photo had been moved to the center. In it, he stood on the porch, smiling awkwardly at the camera. Snow on his shoulders. One hand raised. Frozen mid-knock. That photo had never existed before. My hands shook as I turned it over. Written on the back, in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. It learned from him first. The lights went out. Not flickered. Out. The darkness felt immediate and absolute, like the house had swallowed the air itself. I heard my own breathing grow too loud, too fast. Then footsteps. Upstairs. Slow. Measured. Someone pacing. I shouted before I could stop myself. "I know you're not real." The footsteps paused. A voice answered from above, calm and patient. "Neither are you. Not anymore." Something clicked inside my head then, not understanding but memory. I remembered that night. The night my father died. The knock. I had been 13, halfway down the stairs, watching him through the railing as he hesitated at the door. My mother was behind him, begging in whispers. "Don't answer it," she said. "Please." My father frowned, hand already on the knob. "But it sounds like..." The knock came again. Tap, tap, tap. And then the voice. Not his mother's. Not his brother's. Mine. "Dad." It said from outside. "Why won't you open the door?" I had never remembered saying that. I didn't remember screaming when he opened it either. But I remembered the space where he used to be afterward, the way the house felt heavier, hungrier. The lights snapped back on. I was no longer alone in the living room. Footprints led from the staircase to the hallway. Bare, smooth, waiting. I ran. Up the stairs, 2 at a time, driven by something between terror and desperation. If it was going to happen again, I needed to see it, to face it. Running hadn't saved my father. The upstairs hallway was wrong. Too long. Too narrow. The walls leaned inward, close enough that my shoulders brushed them. Doors lined both sides, more than there should have been, stretching into shadow. I opened the first one. My childhood bedroom. Exactly as I'd left it years ago. Same bed. Same posters. Same faint smell of dust and old paper. On the bed sat a man. My father. Or something wearing him. His face was older, stretched thin, eyes too deep in their sockets. His hands rested on his knees, fingers twitching like they were remembering how to move. He looked up at me. "Oh," he said softly. "It's your turn." I stumbled back, hitting the wall. "You're dead." He smiled sadly. "So were you. The moment you spoke through the door." The hallway behind me shifted. Doors closing. Walls breathing. I screamed his name. He stood, movements stiff and delayed, like a marionette with tangled strings. "It doesn't let us stop," he said. "It just teaches us how to wait." The floor cracked beneath him as he took a step closer. I ran again. Down the hall, past doors that whispered as I passed. Some spoke my name. Others spoke names I didn't recognize. Some just knocked from the inside. I burst into the bathroom and slammed the door, locking it. The mirror fogged instantly. Words appeared in the steam. "You heard the knock." I backed away until I hit the tub. "I didn't open the door," I whispered. The mirror cracked. "You answered." That night blurred into fragments. Voices calling from empty rooms. Objects moving inches when I wasn't looking. My phone ringing with my own number on the screen. At one point, I heard the Garcias outside, shouting, pounding on the walls, begging me not to listen. When I looked through the window, there was no one there. Just snow. Just footprints. Facing inward. By the third night, I stopped questioning whether I was losing my mind. The house no longer pretended. Doors unlocked themselves. Lights followed me from room to room. Reflections lagged behind my movements, smiling when I didn't. I found a room that hadn't existed before. At the end of the hall, where the wall used to be. Inside were coats. Dozens of them. Hanging neatly. Each tagged with a name. Some scratched out. Some faded. I found my father's. And next to it, mine. The knocking began again. Not at the front door. Every door. Every wall. Inside my chest. Tap, tap, tap. The voice returned. Not outside, not inside, everywhere. "You understand now," it said. "We don't take you. We replace you." The house exhaled. And I knew, with awful clarity, that the climax was no longer coming. It had already started. Midnight did not arrive. It repeated. The clock in the living room still read 12:47, its hands trembling slightly now, as if they were afraid to move forward. Every other clock in the house matched it. My phone, when I checked, displayed the same time. Frozen, blinking weakly, the battery draining faster than it should. The house had decided this was the moment. And it wasn't letting go. The knocking had stopped everywhere except one place. My chest. Tap, tap, tap. Each beat landed out of rhythm with my heart, like a second pulse had been introduced into my body. I pressed my palm against my sternum, gasping, feeling the vibration beneath my skin. "You don't get to hurry this," the voice said. It came from the walls. From the ceiling. From my own mouth. "You don't get to leave early." I staggered into the hallway. The floor dipped beneath my feet like wet ground, stretching with each step. Doors appeared where there had been blank wall moments ago. Too many doors. All different styles. All closed. All knocking. The sound was no longer patient. It was eager. I screamed, raw and hoarse. "What do you want from me?" The house answered by opening a door. Not slowly. Violently. The spare bedroom burst open, the frame splintering outward. Cold air rushed from inside, carrying the smell of snow and something older. Rust, rot, forgotten winters. Inside the room stood people. Not ghosts. Not shadows. Waiting figures. Men, women, children. All standing perfectly still, facing the doorway. Their faces were wrong. Some were blurred, as if memory itself had failed to finish them. Others were too sharp. Their expressions frozen mid-fear. They spoke together. We waited. I fell back, hitting the wall. One of them stepped forward. A woman in a winter coat, her eyes hollow. "I was the first," she said. "Christmas, 1952. Another voice followed. "He sounded like my brother." A child's voice whispered. "He sounded like me." Their mouths moved slightly out of sync with their words. "You don't kill us," I said, shaking. "You trap us." The voice smiled through all of them. "We teach you how to stand." The hallway twisted. The doors slammed shut all at once, the sound deafening. I felt pressure build in my head, memories surfacing without permission. I saw my father again, not as he was when I found him missing, but after. Standing in the doorway. Knocking. Waiting. His eyes empty, his mouth whispering words he didn't choose. I remembered my mother screaming, not when he disappeared, but months later, when she heard the knock again. She hadn't opened it. She left. I stayed. The realization broke something inside me. "I was never meant to leave," I whispered. The house shuddered. "Yes," it replied softly. The walls peeled away. Not collapsing, withdrawing. The house unfolded like a stage being dismantled, revealing what lay beneath. A corridor. Endless. Lined with doors on both sides. Each door marked with a time. Each time marked 1247. I was pulled forward without moving, dragged by a force that wasn't physical but absolute. My feet left the floor. My body drifted, suspended in the air like a puppet whose strings had been gathered tight. At the end of the corridor stood the front door. My front door. Frost coated the wood. Cracks crawled across its surface like veins. And there, carved deep into the center, were fingerprints. Dozens of them, worn smooth by years of knocking. Behind it something waited. I heard my voice again. Not mocking. Pleading. "Please," it said. "I can't knock forever." I sobbed. "I won't open it." The door handle turned anyway. "That's not how it works," the voice replied gently. "You already did." The door opened. There was no outside. Only another version of the hallway. And another. And another. Layers of the same moment stacked endlessly, each with someone standing at the door. Different faces, same posture. My father stepped out of one of them. He looked worse now. Faded. Transparent around the edges. "It hurts," he said. "Not pain. Time." He touched my shoulder, his hand cold and unreal. "I tried to stop knocking," he whispered. "It wouldn't let me." I grabbed him. My hands passed through. "I'm sorry," he said. "It needs a place to stand." The knocking stopped. Silence crashed down so suddenly it made my ears ring. The house leaned in. The voice, no longer pretending to be anyone else, spoke directly. "You are awake now." The floor vanished beneath me. I fell. Not downward. Into memory, into sound, into the space between moments. I stood in the living room again. The Christmas lights were on. The TV played static. The front door was closed. Someone knocked. Tap, tap, tap. I stood. Walked to the door. My hand reached for the knob. Every instinct screamed not to touch it, but my body moved with calm certainty. This was familiar. This was practiced. I placed my hand on the door. A voice came from the other side. Young. Afraid. Mine. "Dad." It whispered. "Why won't you open the door?" I understood then. The cycle wasn't punishment. It was occupation. The house didn't haunt. It stood in place of something else. And it needed someone to hold the shape. The door creaked. I pressed my forehead against the wood, tears running silently down my face. "I'm sorry," I whispered. And then I knocked. From the inside. The snow stopped falling sometime after dawn, though the world outside didn't look any brighter. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual groans of settling wood were gone, replaced by a silence so dense it pressed against my ears. I stayed in the living room, staring at the front door. Its surface looked ordinary, familiar, but I knew better. Behind it, the cycle waited. Behind it, the other me waited. I tried to leave. Every exit felt farther than it should. Hallways stretching into shadow. I opened a window once, hoping to climb out, but it led to a brick wall I didn't remember being there. The city, the world, all unreachable. Outside was only snow and whiteness, endless and indifferent. I sat down on the couch, my back pressed to the wall, arms wrapped around my knees. Time lost meaning. The lights blinked faintly, the TV static humming softly, as if the house were breathing around me. I remembered everything now. The first knock, the first time my father opened that door, the people who came before me, each standing in place, frozen by a shape they didn't want, repeating a ritual they couldn't understand. The knocking had stopped, but I knew better. It didn't stop. It waited. It had just paused, rested, learned. I tried speaking aloud. No one answered. My voice sounded strange, even to me. Small, thin, as if swallowed by walls thicker than wood. The house listened anyway. Every sound I made registered somewhere, echoing, folding, waiting. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift when I blinked. Always at the edge of vision, never fully there. I remembered the neighbors, Mrs. Garcia and her husband. The way they hadn't invited me in. The way they whispered names like warnings, not conversation. I had believed I might leave, that this horror could end if I survived the night. That hope was gone. I understood now. This house didn't want survivors. It didn't want victims. It wanted holders of the shape, someone to answer when it knocked, someone to stand in place. Hours or maybe days passed. I no longer measured by clocks, by steps, by doors opening and closing, always in time with my heartbeat. I didn't try to escape. There was no escape. The house made sure of that. Occasionally, I thought I heard a familiar voice. Soft, distant. My father. Myself. Another who had come before. It whispered in fragments. "It's cold, it's waiting." But even the words weren't mine. They belonged to the house. The walls began to change again, subtly at first. Pictures of the people who had answered the knock before lined the hallway. Faces faded, names scratched out, coats hanging as if waiting for the next person to arrive. I realized some of the coats were mine now. Some of them were others I didn't remember meeting. Each held a weight, a presence, a warning. I would become like them. I tried to speak to myself, to the reflection in the windows. My own voice sounded older, deeper. Not mine. The house had begun to teach me the shape it wanted me to hold. I walked the halls endlessly, each step familiar and alien at the same time. Doors appeared and disappeared. Rooms I hadn't entered and had no memory of stretched infinitely. I passed mirrors that didn't reflect me correctly. My face slightly off, shadows moving where my hands should have been. Each reflection whispered the truth I could no longer deny. The house was alive and I was already part of it. Outside, the snow drifted silently. A postman passed the street, saw the house, and turned away without knocking. It was Christmas morning. Families celebrated, lights glimmered, laughter carried through the wind. The house didn't care. It never cared. It only waited. Sometimes I think the neighbors notice. Sometimes they glance at the windows and say nothing, crossing themselves before entering their homes. But none of them ever enter the house. None ever answer the knock. They only know to keep the ritual at bay. The knocking will always come, and someone will always stand. I sat in my father's old chair in the living room, the lights flickering overhead. The TV static buzzed softly. For a moment, I felt a strange, terrible peace. I had learned the rhythm, the waiting, the standing. I had become the shape. Then, from somewhere deep inside the house, a knock echoed. Tap, tap, tap. It was soft at first, patient. Then it grew louder, insistent. Not at the front door. Not anywhere outside. Inside me. I stood. My hand rose slowly. I pressed it against my chest. Tap, tap, tap. The house hummed. The walls leaned closer. Shadows stretched across the ceiling. I closed my eyes. I whispered softly, "It's cold." And the house answered. The knocking continued. Waiting for someone else.